I was in the Army in 1967, 68, and back in the 60s I went to Oak Ridge Military College thinking I'd do a 2-year college and go into the service and make a career of it. They closed the college down after the first year I was there. I was offered a basketball scholarship at Campbell University back at that time, and I went home that summer and had such a good time I didn't go back. And so then I realized I'd made a mistake, and my dad had always said, if you want to grow up, go to the Army, they'll get you 3 square meals and a place to sleep every night, and you can mature. And so I made the mistake of going over to the draft board, or the good fortune, whichever way you look at it, and asked them to draft me because 2 years was shorter, and I figured I could make up my mind in 2 years rather than staying in for 4. And didn't think about Vietnam at all, was not on my radar until after basic training. I went to Fort Jackson, and they were training soldiers for the river rats down in the Delta in South Vietnam.
So once you got word that you were going to Vietnam, how'd you tell your family, I guess?
Well, my parents were not too happy with me. My mother was a teacher. My daddy was chief deputy of the sheriff's department. So they would have rather me not be in the military at all at that point. But I mean, I'd already made a commitment, and I was going, and so we endured.
How was basic training for you?
Basic training was pretty easy for me. I was an athlete. I played a lot of basketball, baseball, and so I won't say it was easy, but it was the physical part, the mental part that they beat on you and hollered at you and got in your face and those kind of things. That was the part that a lot of people had a lot of problems with. And the physical part, it was much, I don't know what it is today, but it was a lot of exercise, a lot of up in the morning at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and long marches and those kind of things.
Instead of coming in and going out at 4 in the morning, you were going out in different ways.
That's right. That's exactly right. One of the things I remember most, before you ate, you always had to do 40, what they call chin bars. These bars you see, jungle gym bars that you go from thing. You had to touch each one. You couldn't just go. I had long arms. I could bypass them, but you had to go down and back 3 times before you could go into the chow line.
So you get the call. You know you're going to Vietnam now. What was that like for you mentally?
Well, I wasn't sure. I didn't know much about the war in Vietnam, but as a young man, you know, you're always excited about some new adventures and those kind of things. I was real good with the weapons. Like I said, I was a good athlete, so the only certificate I basically have in life is a sharpshooter with a M16. So I was somewhat looking forward to it, but knowing that there were some bad things that were over there. Didn't know where I was going to be assigned basically until I got there, and I was assigned to the Mobile Riverine Forces down in the Delta. We operated a little bit south of Saigon, Can Tho, My Tho, up and down the Mekong River. Our barracks were not at a base except originally at Bearcat, and the rest of the time we were on what we call the boats. They were barrack boats, and we ran these little monitor boats and these World War II landing crafts like landed at D-Day, tango boats, and we would go up and down these rivers and try to surprise the enemy. That didn't work very good because there were 2 Volvo motors on the back and made a lot of noise. And in Vietnam, there's no ancillary noises where the refrigerators are running, those kind of things, so they could hear that motor coming from 10 miles off.
You guys were definitely one of the biggest sitting targets in Vietnam, I think.
We were. It was a Navy-Army operation together. The Navy guys, of course, drove the boats, and then they'd drop us off, and then we'd do land search missions. And then if some fighting started, we were also a strike force. If fighting started somewhere, they'd pick us up with helicopters and fly us over to where the fighting was. One of the things that we did that I remember, we had at least 7 or 8 hot LZs that I didn't. You don't think about what those things are, especially at my age today, but I really didn't. I just thought everybody else was doing the same thing I was doing, so you didn't complain. But a hot LZ is pretty tough when you fly in between your guys shooting and the enemy shooting and have to get off that airplane without much cover or helicopter.
What got you through?
I think I'm a people person, and there were 3 guys from North Carolina, Lemmy D. Lungsford and Langdon, and we all went to Fort Jackson together, and Lemmy D and I were in basic together, and we talked a lot. Lemmy D was killed, and Langdon and I survived, and Langdon actually just passed away about 2 months ago here. He lived up in Smithfield, I think, and so I think just I'm from North Carolina and had never been out of North Carolina much, so you got to know a lot of people from all over the country. New Yorkers, Texans, Californians. Traber was a guy from California. He was a different stroke, but you got to know, and you talked about those things. You talked about your parents. You talked about your girlfriends back home if you had one. You talked about what you wanted to do when you got back home. So there was a lot of conversation about those kind of things, and I got to know the United States a little bit from a history lesson, and I thought that was kind of unique.
What are some of your good memories of those? You talked about the two gentlemen from North Carolina that you were friends with.
Right.
What were some of your good memories with them that you got to experience?
Well, the good memories were, like I said, I got to know a lot of people from all over the country. I also got to know a young lady, had a short opportunity to meet a young lady and to have a short time of 6 or 7 dates, so to speak, that her name was Wong, and so it was a growing up time for me. My dad was right. You grow up in the Army and you grow up in a war even quicker. So good times were funny times, like when I shot a chicken with a .357 Magnum and thought we'd have something good to eat, but the .357 Magnum just, the only thing left was his cone and his 2 legs. So you know, things like when Water Buffalo charges your lieutenant, I mean, you have to quit laughing and shoot him in time so he doesn't run over the lieutenant. Those kind of things. So there are a lot of funny things that happened that would, you know, you wouldn't ever have happen in their dangers. They're all dangerous, but they kind of have a little humor to them.
How different was Vietnam from North Carolina for you?
Well, Vietnam was interesting in that the Vietnamese people were similar to a lot of people that are here in North Carolina or all over the country. I used to think there were 8 or 9 personalities, and the Vietnamese people had those personalities, and there were people who were strong-willed and people who were humorous and people who cried and a variety of personalities. And I found that in the Vietnamese people. They were good. The farmers out in the fields, they basically wanted to farm, and they had to deal with the Viet Cong being there telling them to do one thing, and then when we'd move in, they'd have to deal with us, and they liked that, but they knew that we would leave, and that would put them back in danger.
What was one of the, I guess, the scarier moments that you can remember that when you just felt like it was really going to be rough?
Well, I had 4 or 5 of those, but I guess the day I was wounded was a very scary day. There were a group of us sitting down for lunch, had a new lieutenant, had only been there a couple of weeks, and we could hear the fighting off in a distance. And me being not a coward, but knowing what I was doing, I said, okay, well, we don't want to go over there. That sounds pretty heavy. So let's see if we can't do something different. We looked on the map and found a river that had a fork in it, small canals. And usually when the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese fight, they have to have a way to get out. So I suggested we go set up an ambush down at this fork, because that's where they'd have sampans, which are small boats that they could float away. We did that, and the problem was there were 27 of us and 300 of them. And over the period of from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until about 4 o'clock at night, midnight or PM, we were doing some fighting of some sort. Good thing about that was they were trying to get out rather than trying to kill a number of us. But they were constantly walking into us and running up, and firefights all night.
So how did you get wounded?
We tried to, at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, we were trying to find a spot to bring helicopters in, because 2 or 3 guys had already gotten wounded and a couple killed, trying to get them out. So I sent 3 of my guys out to find a place where a helicopter could land, which was very difficult in this particular area, and they got ambushed as they were going out, and so we went out to bring them back. And as I was on the leg of one of the guys coming back, some got me on my leg. And so then the guy that got shot in the arm, I jumped on his back, and we kept firing, and we kept moving back to where we huddled up as a little circle.
What was that experience like for you? Was that a wake-up call?
Well, it was in my 6th or 7th month, and so you were used to fighting. You were used to bullets coming over your head, and so I don't know that, I'm not trying to say that I was good at it, but you just endured. You don't think about it. Training, we just had a big fire here in Raleigh, and the fire chief said training. And training and experience goes a long way. There's no doubt about it. And so, when you know what things are happening, you just do them. You can't get on a bus and come back. I often look at. I got to be careful how I say this because people got Bronze Stars and stuff, and I often look at some of the Bronze Stars and Silver Stars that say he stayed with his unit. Well, ain't no leaving your unit. There's no bus around the corner that you can go jump on and drive away. So I got a little heart for that. I have to be careful how I say that. But anyway, you just do what you got to do to survive. I will say the decision making. Once I went to the rank of sergeant, buck sergeant, and lots of times a lieutenant, you would be the highest ranking officer in your squad, and hardest decision or that I regret or don't regret, I don't know which one I do, is to send 2 men to the left and 2 men to the right, knowing that people going to the right or the left might be much more dangerous, and how you pick those men is important. And I don't know that you physically think or mentally think which ones you want. You just have 5, 6 guys with you, and you send half this way and half that way, and usually it's the ones that are standing to the left and the right of you. I was wounded in Vietnam, and ironically, I didn't realize what day I was wounded until years later when they did the memorial here in Raleigh. I went to the wall in Washington and realized Lemmy D, who was from Roxborough, one of the guys that was killed, and he was killed the same day I was wounded. I realized it's February 14th, which is Valentine's Day. So you don't think about, that tells you don't think about what the date or what it is. But when you do get short, you worry about, actually a lot of people got killed when they first got there, and a number got killed when they were short. And I don't know what the reason other than when you're new, you're inexperienced, but when you're old, your mind's off on other things. So, but I was wounded and stayed in the hospital for a month and a half or 6 weeks. And then went back to the base camp, which was Bearcat. The ships were out on, and then I went back out on the ships. And I didn't break a bone. It was just a flesh wound in my leg. I had to learn how to walk again. And during that time, and so I had about a month and a half, 2 months to go, and they didn't know what to do with me. They weren't sure whether they should let me go back out or whatever. But initially, I went back out, and for the last month that I was there, and did search and destroy missions and set up ambushes and those kind of things. So my mind was still back on trying to survive and trying to do what we did to the enemy and those kind of things. But it was, you just didn't talk about it. Nobody talked to you about being short unless you wanted to. I mean, you may write your numbers on there and count them down, but I do remember going out on a mission and setting up an ambush. People don't realize how we came back from Vietnam, but we set that ambush up and had a firefight that night. The next morning, we were there drinking coffee, and the helicopters come in and bring you new ammo and new food. And as they did, they unloaded all that, and all of a sudden the pilot says, "Odom, is Odom out there?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm here." He says, "Well, they got a plane for you if you're ready to go." And so I literally went from the field to the helicopter, back to the base camp, back to another helicopter, back to Tonsanute Air Force Base, got on the airplane, and when almost a little over 48 hours, I was back in the United States of America, from a combat situation to there.
If you want to keep it rolling, try to see if you can get them to be a little more quiet out there for me. I'll keep asking questions.
Rachel, step out there and tell Ron to tell them to be a little quiet if they can.
Whoever's unwrapping tape or something. Yeah, you can keep it rolling. Just,
Yeah.
I was going to say just.
She just said thank you, so I guess.
What was your welcome home like?
Well, I was from North Carolina. We have Fort Bragg and Camp Lejeune, and so not as bad as I didn't have anybody spit on me or any of those things. I did fly back into Fort Dix, New Jersey, and realized that when I went to go to the bus to get to the airport, it was a bus with a wire cage around the side of it, and I said, "That looks like a prison bus down in Scotland County." And I said, I'm not getting on that." And so the officer said, "Well, you got to go in and get out of your uniform, put on civilian clothes, and take a taxi." And so I did that. And then I went to the airport. I forget which one it was, but anyway, I paid the extra $20 to do a ride. It wasn't the lattice, but it was up with coach. It was a little bit better than everybody else, and so I paid that extra. And then I went to the bar and sat down and saw if my charm was still about. So I struck up a conversation with a young lady, and she started talking about her pet that she had to have a surgery on, and she had to spend $50 to have her dog, the broken leg or whatever it was. And I sat there and thought, okay, I'm back. Because, you know, about 3 weeks later, we were out in the field and they were eating dog. And here I got this lady spending $50 on her dog to get it repaired. So I knew I was home very quickly. And my friends, Ronnie Leviner and others, they welcomed me home.
What about your parents?
Parents were glad to see me. Absolutely. Absolutely. So.
What happened when you first got home and got to see your parents the first time again? What happened?
Well, I had I flew into Raleigh-Durham right here and walked off through the thing. And back then there was a small airport. I walked through the airport out and walked down a dirt road onto the main highway and stuck my thumb out. And I thumbed from here to Cameron Village. A guy picked me up and took me to Cameron Village. And I thought if I could just get over here where the Karina Chow place was, it used to be over here on 401 going to Fayetteville, I could catch a ride there. So finally a guy says, listen, I'll take you over this. I got to go by Cameron Village to my apartment, pick something up, and I'll take you over there if you're willing to wait. So I went and we got over to Cameron Village to some apartments over there. It took him 15 to 20 minutes and he dropped me off right over where I wanted to be. It wasn't 5 seconds. I picked up a ride all the way to Fayetteville. And there's a Hardee's still on Fayetteville Road, 401 going down south. And I stood beside, right down below that Hardee's. It's still there today. For a long time, I said, listen, this is Fayetteville. I thought somebody picked me up, you know, GIs. This is unbelievable. And I could hear a guy working on a car. He was revving the motor up. He was trying to get it running right down a little dirt road. I couldn't see where he was. All of a sudden, he came out. He said, where are you going? I said, well, I need to go to Wagram. He said, you got any gas money? I said, I'll pay for the gas in your car if you'll take me to Wagram. And so we did. And he took me home and nobody was there. But there was a sign that said, welcome home. So my parents were glad to see me and I was glad to see them.
Big hugs?
Big hugs, yes.
What's it like being able to come out to events like this now, so many years later, and finally get a true welcome home?
Well, you get to talk. I think we've already had it. We keep talking about that. And I think since we've bonded together, the NCVVI group that I'm a member of, and all these guys have had different stories. And we go into the classrooms in Wake County high schools when some invite us from time to time, and some of the charter schools, and talk about our experiences. And that's been good for everybody. I probably didn't talk about Vietnam at all for 4 or 5 years, or actually I didn't talk about it till the memorial was built here in '87 or something like that. Got married, had children, those kind of things, but just didn't talk about it because nobody that I hung around with had been to Vietnam. So that's so it wasn't that they didn't respect me or anything. It's just that we just didn't talk about war. You know, I call the war of Vietnam the inconvenience war. And everybody said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, in the '60s, if you got a high school education and you were willing to work, you could make more than your parents made. And you were uplifted and you could do a whole lot more. A lot of people don't realize that. It just depended on you wanting to go do it, and you could do it real quickly. I think that's changed a little bit in today's society because of technology and the stuff that you have to know to get the good jobs. It's a lot tougher. So I feel for the younger generation as it is. But back in then, this was a war of inconvenience. We had it great. The blacks were getting freedom. Women were burning bras. It was just a great time. A young white man with $55 in his pocket, he could get a date. It was just a great time. And so it was inconvenient to go to some foreign country that most of us had never heard about to fight a war.